So let's cultivate our motivation. And we may have great admiration for bodhicitta and just the nobility of that intention, how extensive it is, how, miraculous it is. So we may have that and love bodhicitta, and at the same time get really ticked off at sentient beings because they're so uncooperative and ridiculous. So if you have that happen in your practice, that you love bodhicitta, but you're irritated at sentient beings and can't stand them sometimes, then something's amiss with our bodhicitta, because to generate bodhicitta, we depend on sentient beings. So if we see sentient beings as really irascible and don't want to be around them, then, we're leaving out a very important and essential step. And our admiration for bodhicitta isn't really understanding what bodhicitta is, because bodhicitta is gained by independence on sentient beings. And it's for their benefit, so we need them to generate bodhicitta. Yeah, so the altruistic intention isn't some abstract idea that is separate from sentient beings. So it's really important to bring our love and compassion and bodhicitta, remember that it's for specific sentient beings, and each and every sentient being specifically. So it's not some idealistic sky in the pie ideal that's unrelated to all the sentient beings around us. So really looking at the situation of the sentient beings around us, what they go through being in samsara, seeing their kindness and seeing them as endearing and lovable, then that's generate love and compassion for them. And on that basis, generate the intention to become a Buddha, to be able to benefit them. Do you ever have that happen in your practice, that you love bodhicitta, but sentient beings are so irritating? And we say, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Which sentient beings? Because I can't stand the ones around me. So which sentient beings are all sentient beings? Yeah? So we have to, remember it's individual sentient beings, and whoever they are, whatever kind of body they're in, whatever political affiliation they have, whatever their level of ethical control or unethical havoc. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so somebody's still, I remember when we were doing the syllogisms before, that there were some syllogisms about government policy. So somebody's still working on that. So reads, the subject, American gun laws, do not protect the public because a person who wishes to harm, be they a felon, mentally ill, or an ordinary citizen, is able to purchase guns and assault rifles, which are then used to kill people. So, the thesis, American gun laws do not protect the public. The subject, American gun laws, the predicate, do not protect the public. The reason, a person who wishes to harm, be they a felon, mentally ill, or an ordinary citizen, is able to purchase guns and assault rifles, which are then used to kill people. So they gave the forward provision. They didn't give the thing of showing the connection between the subject and the predicate, the subject and the reason. Okay, so what's the connection? Is there? No, the subject is American gun laws.
Well, it is, but then it becomes any person.
The reason is a person who wishes.
Yeah, the reason is a person who wishes.
Yeah. So does the reason pertain to the subject?
No.
No.
And it sounds like it was switched. The subject then became a person who wishes.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So how would you reword this to make the reason equality of the subject?
Initially, I had it as your American gun laws allow for a felon, the mentally ill, an ordinary citizen to then to make these purchases. Would that help? If instead of a person, American gun laws allow?
No, you still have to have a subject there. I think you would have to say American gun laws, and then the reason would be they do not prevent a person who wishes to harm, blah, 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 your long reason. Because if your subject is American gun laws, your reason has to pertain to that subject.
I wonder if you could say American gun laws don't protect people because they allow a person.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've connected the reason with the subject.
Yeah. So that's similar. I said do not prevent a person from getting a gun. It's the same saying. They allow the person to get the gun.
There are some laws that do restrict some of those things, and often a felon cannot buy a gun. So that would mean that that's not the subject. The reason is not a property of the subject because a felon can't buy a gun.
Yeah.
But recently, there have been felons who have bought guns.
Yes, but your subject is American gun laws.
But it's not legal.
Yeah, the American gun laws don't permit it, but sometimes it happens. But your subject is the American gun laws. Okay, then what would the forward provision be? If the reason has been changed to they allow a person who wishes to harm.
Whatever allows a felon or a mentally ill person to purchase a gun does not necessarily protect the American people.
The forward provision would be, if it allows a person who wishes to harm, be they a felon, mentally ill, or an ordinary citizen, is able to purchase guns and assault rifles, which are then used to kill people. Okay. If all of that, then necessarily the gun laws don't protect the public. Is that correct or not?
Because there are laws that protect the American public that have nothing to do with this, such as health laws and food laws. They do protect the people, but they have nothing to do with restricting guns.
I said American
Subject
laws.
is gun laws.
Yeah, but the reason is, you know, that the American gun laws, well, it is pertaining to American gun laws, allow a person who wishes to harm, be they a felon, mentally ill, or an ordinary citizen, to be able to purchase guns and assault rifles, which are then used to kill people.
Yeah, okay, but there are also gun laws that do protect us. They just don't protect us to the extent that they could, because there are gun laws about having, in some states, about having a gun in your car, if you have a gun in your car, the ammo has to be in the trunk, can't be in the gun. So we are not without gun laws. We just don't, that protect the people. We just don't have adequate ones.
Yeah.
For some
Okay.
aspects.
So you're saying that just because somebody's allowed to buy a gun doesn't mean that the laws don't protect the people.
Right, there are aspects that we are being protected in,
Yeah.
but not enough.
Yeah. Right. But just by the fact that people, now she could say as long as somebody has a gun, then the public isn't going to be protected. The people in NRA will say, but you have wise gun owners, and this is taking them out of the equation. So they're not going to like this reason.
It also sounds like the reason is stating, and I maybe need to hear it again, but that anybody who has a gun necessarily is going to kill someone.
It's kind of implying that.
There's the phrase in there, who wishes to harm.
Yeah. Here, you can read it down there. Okay. So American gun laws allow a person who is, first of all, the way you worded it and made the reason so long, it makes it very difficult to put it all together. You know, because you specify, you know, a felon, the mentally ill, an ordinary citizen, but then you're certainly leaving out some people. Yeah. So, shorter reasons always work better, because as the more things that you put in your reason, then the more difficult it is to get the point. Yeah. So if you shorten it to gun laws, the reason to these gun laws allow anybody to buy a gun if they wish to harm, or just say, okay. So if the laws allow anybody, because that's what you're saying, isn't it? They allow anybody to, if they wish to harm, to get a gun. Is that true? No, that's not true. There are laws that prevent people who wish to harm from getting a gun.
I think from a policy point of view, also the subject is too broad. And then you have to specify like gun laws that allow the purchase of guns without secondary background checks. Then, that's the only way. I mean, if you are arguing policy, it has to be.
It has to be specific.
American gun laws is like, huh?
Yeah,
it's not clear.
Very
what
broad.
It's
very broad. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then the next one. Okay. So sarcasm. And I was sarcastic yesterday. So I don't know if maybe she wrote this whole one just for me. I'm sure. I was sarcastic yesterday. Yeah. When I said, I'm so glad all of you, reviewed for the Vinaya class. I said, you're such good students. I was sarcastic. So the thesis is, sarcasm motivated by an affliction is harsh speech. Now somebody's imputing a motivation to me just because I was sarcastic. I didn't read the whole syllogism. The subject, sarcasm motivated by an affliction, falls in the category of harsh speech. Just it's easier to make it succinct, is harsh speech, because its purposes include to deliver a sharp and often satirical or ironic utterance designed to cut or give pain, witty language to convey insults or scorn, a message whose ingenuity or verbal skill or incongruity has the power to evoke laughter at the expense of someone else. Okay, you ask people about the qualities of that. See if anybody can remember the reason.
We don't have to continue. Let's just stop. There's no point.
No, it's good because this is what people often do in when we make syllogisms is we add everything in and then it becomes confusing and difficult to prove. Whereas if you start with kind of give things to people in chunks, then it becomes easier.
Sarcasm, motivated by affliction, is harsh speech because its purpose is to cut or give pain. Does that get to your point?
That wasn't my purpose. My purpose was to get you to study.
You're mixing two things here.
No, I'm not. I know you were meaning it for me.
Okay, so what's the subject?
Venerable children who was motivated by affliction. Where's Venerable Yeshi? She'll stick up for me. She knows how people are you. She's gone. Oh, but she knows how people always, pick you up, pick it up. So they're not picking on her this time. They're picking on me. Go on.
Subject, venerable children.
Oh, sorry. The subject, sarcasm. Sarcasm motivated by an affliction. The predicate? So the thesis? The reason? Its purpose is to cut or give pain. So, is the property of the reason in the subject? Does the subject have the property of the reason? No.
Why not?
Sarcasm is not necessarily directed at a person. Like it can be just in general.
No, but the subject connected to the reason.
Right.
What would that be?
Sarcasm is not always intended to harm or to hurt or to cut. It's intended to be witty or funny or other reasons.
However, I looked at definitions of sarcasm. I could not find a single one that suggested it could be just lighthearted and funny. And if you look at the root of the word, you can read that. The root of the word gets to it.
From Latin sarcasmus, from late Greek sarkasmos, a sneer, jest, taunt, mockery. From sargassine, to speak bitterly, sneer, literally to strip off the flesh, to wound.
Is that really the meaning of sarcasm nowadays?
That's the origin.
That's the origin.
Is that the meaning? I don't know. Okay, and somebody else said yes, it is true.
I thought the subject itself was sarcasm motivated by an affliction. So therefore it necessarily has the purpose of wishing to harm, right?
No, because you can have an affliction of attachment that wants to be the center stage, and if you're sarcastic and you're witty, Okay, so it doesn't always have the motivation of harm.
I accept.
It does say in the definition here too.
Yeah.
Designed to cut or give pain.
Yeah, but they don't know what they're talking about. No, because if you think of like some of the comics, you know, who talk about policy and everything, do you think that everything they do in making fun of, you know, the government and politicians, do you think that's designed to cause pain? They use a lot of sarcasm, but is it designed to cause pain? Or is it designed to relieve tension? Or is it designed to help people to see the stupidity in sentient beings? I mean, isn't sarcasm sometimes funny? You just have it out for sarcasm.
I used to do it all the time.
Oh.
I've been looking at it a lot during purification.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. You mean you weren't? You mean I'm invisible? Nobody notices me?
Whose ingenuity or verbal skill or incongruity has the power to evoke laughter at the expense of someone else.
But at the expense of someone else, does that mean that it's designed to hurt the other person?
I guess it's just interpretation about at the expense of someone else.
But sometimes, aren't we being sarcastic about ourselves?
Motivated by affliction is what points this in the right direction, though.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, too, I wasn't here for class, so I don't know. But I think I've heard from the lips of a teacher whose compassion I trust, some sarcasm that was designed not to hurt but to guide. So, but I also assume that's not motivated by an affliction.
Mm.
That's why I put in life.
Oh. She's covering herself. But then she says, but sarcasm is really, all of it is designed.
I've done it so much in my life. I'm just trying to get a handle on it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we're done.
Okay. Okay, so where were we? We were at,
The second reason.
yes, my thing just moved here. Okay. So the three purposes of debate, and we went through the first reason is to refute wrong ideas and faulty reasoning. The second purpose of reasoning and debate is the presentation of our own system. Here, our own means the author's system, who's presuming that you're on his side. Although there is a great deal of agreement on basic topics, there is a lot of difference on many topics, school to school, and even monastery to monastery. Thus, our own system does not mean some universally accepted Buddhist position. This is important, you know, because we think, okay, there's got to be there's one right view, one right answer, and everybody's got to accept it, you know, and our system has it. Okay, but the thing is, depending when you're studying tenets, depending what system you're using, that becomes our system, and they have very, very different views, don't they? Yeah. Okay, so thus our system does not mean some universally accepted Buddhist position. Even on the most basic topics, such as the presentation of forms, there are differences. I was thinking that we really should rewrite some of the, some of the collected topics things based on science, yeah, and see how it works, like even colors and forms and, all sorts of things. Okay, the second section, at least in the collected topics text, often just lays out the definitions, divisions, and mutually inclusive phenomena and illustrations for each point of the topic. However, sometimes the author explains our own system through debates between the two opponents, with the definitions and so forth being presented as part of the debater's discussion. Okay? So it's often presented in terms of debates. And sometimes it's just presented straight out, this. This side of debate is the effort to establish something irrefutable. It calls on a person's skills in the role of a defender more than as a challenger. Any good challenger may be able to raise qualms against any position, but if the position is well-founded, a skillful defender will be able to resolve those apparent qualms. So that's why it's much easier to attack somebody else's syllogism, because you don't have to prove anything, you know. So the person who does the syllogism is defending, and they're the ones who have to stand up and prove their position. It is more difficult to establish a defensible position. In introductory debate, a person learns how to ask the questions to draw out the implications of an assertion. That's what we were doing just now, yeah? In both of those, drawing out implications and seeing what's going on. However, this procedure is not complete. Rather, asking questions, raising qualms, and drawing out the implications of a view are merely investigative tools, so they do not always lead a person to an irrefutable conclusion. Thus, the more important position is that of the defender, who asserts and holds a view. If debate is for the sake of establishing the truth, it is in the role of the defender that a person learns to really test a thought. Of course, as we normally experience it ourselves, when we reflect on something, part of the tradition is to anticipate possible objections to what we believe to be true, to think about it from multiple angles. We challenge ourselves. A competent defender cannot just wait for a good challenger to come along and raise qualms about the stated position. So what he's saying here is when we have an idea and we put it in the form of a syllogism, we ourselves should challenge our syllogism and go through this whole procedure. You know, I always get it confused. Is the property a quality of the subject? That's right, isn't it? Yes, the property equality of the subject, you know, and what about the pervasion? And so try those out ourselves and really ask questions and see if it works. And, you know, to ourselves check whatever we're believing and look at it from many, many different perspectives. And then if you do that, then when you're on the debate ground, you've probably already solved some of the things that people could throw at you because you've reworked your syllogism. And, you know, and you've really thought about the issue more in depth. So the other person will probably bring out more things that you haven't thought about. But because you've at least thought about something in more depth, then, you know, you have some ability to see where the challenger is going and if what they're saying makes sense and if your syllogism makes sense. Okay? So what it's saying is don't just throw out things, but think about them first, you know, and test them out yourself. Then put them forward in the debate ground. Given that the Tibetans describe multiple conflicting Buddhist tenet systems and non-Buddhist, mainly Hindu ones as well, why should anyone believe that any position is final and irrefutable? Indeed, the word translated here as tenets, siddhanta or drupta, means established conclusions. However, if you look into it, especially on a vital topic like the ultimate reality of emptiness, there are many different and conflicting Buddhist established conclusions. Okay, as we learned when Jeffrey was teaching us Dzogchen, and we were going, huh? Okay? So how could this be that there's these many different conflicting established conclusions? I mean, science does not hold on to older theories as long as newer ones seem to have been confirmed and have supplanted the older ones. The older theories are abandoned and relegated to the museum of the history of science. Okay? So how come in Buddhism we don't just relegate the Vaibhasikas and everybody else who doesn't think like we do to the museum of Buddhist philosophers?
Because they're stepping stones to get to the higher views.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely one reason. Yeah, because by understanding the lower ones, yeah, then it's gradually stretching your mind and expanding your mind, you know, so that you can understand the upper ones and what the upper ones are trying to refute and what they're trying to assert.
I was really touched by Jeffrey's comment when he said, oh, there's another reason, and the Bodhisattva, you know, he has to go through it because there are different people who may need his support, her support.
Yeah, yeah. That's one quality of how Bodhisattvas study the ultimate nature, is through learning a lot of reasons. You know?
In high school chemistry class, our teacher was teaching us science, but she was teaching old theories, and then she would say that's what they used to believe, and now this is, and because, and I was so annoyed at that. I'm like, why do we spend time learning that when now they're just throwing it out? And recently, reading some Buddhist stuff, I came to appreciate that actually, because I said, oh well, that helped me understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the time, I was very annoyed with it. Yeah. But science does do that. Actually, they do use them as stepping stones too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Because, you know, I mean, the whole thing, you know, they used to think that the world was flat. I think it's helpful to know what people in the past used to think, because what we believe now is influenced by what they believed then, because, you know, we're looking at things from a certain perspective. So how they looked at things then, you know, is our perspective really that different? Or is it the same perspective, but we're just seeing something different?
I was reading a bit about electrons because I was trying to figure out if all electrons are the same. They actually are. All electrons are considered to be exactly the same mass and everything. So this guy Wheeler had a theory that maybe there's only one electron because you never see it.
Oh.
And it was a very helpful theory, even though it was wrong, because it got them to look at certain aspects of things in order to find out what was really going on.
I was at a teaching in Deer Park where Sri Rinpoche said unequivocally, if you don't realize each of these tenets one by one, you will never realize emptiness. And it was such a flat statement that I asked a question later in the review, but that's what he meant. So that's why.
Yeah. But the lower ones definitely accord with our current way of seeing things. And by studying them, we become more aware of what we already believe and what our current perspective is. Because sometimes we're so immersed in our current perspective, we don't realize it's a perspective. We think that everybody sees things this way. Okay, it's like the fish who doesn't know he's swimming in water and we don't think, you know, we're swimming in air because that's all we know. Yeah. So looking at those views from the lower tenets, it's like, oh yeah, I believe that, and I believe this, and yeah. So it helps us sometimes see what we really believe and then begin to question it. So why don't Buddhists settle on a final view and just explain that one? Why are so many different tenet systems preserved? So there are at least 3 possible answers. So he's good. He says at least 3. So he's not limiting it, So first, there is real life in the different views. There are real Buddhists who believe in different things. Thus, the explanation of a philosophical position as an established conclusion is not that it is final for all, but that it is the view some people have settled on as final. It is not your tenet if you think that it may be transcended. This points at one aspect of religious systems, which is that they supply a worldview for their followers. We see the world in accordance with our beliefs. This is why it is called our view. Okay, so some people do see the world this way, and they hold that tenet, and it's good to realize that. That they've thought about it, and this is their conclusion, and, they have reasons for believing what they do. We may be able to, contradict some of those reasons or throw in some other things, but at least we can respect the people for, having some system and having thought about these kinds of things. Yeah. So it would be nice in general civic discourse if we had that view, that different people have different views because they've thought about things more differently. A more different kind of English. I'm just thinking that it would be a good way to help people respect each other instead of trash each other. Yeah, to try and understand, okay, what is somebody's perspective? Why are they thinking this way? Yeah, instead of just saying they're idiots. Like the woman who went down to Louisiana to live with and study the people whose environment was getting trashed by the oil companies, but who loved the oil companies. And she wanted to understand why they felt the way they did, and why they were supporting policies that seemed to harm them and their own environment. So instead of judging, she went there and she stayed with them and she heard their reasons, And when you really listen, it's like, okay, you can understand. You may disagree with that reason. Yeah, I think it's contradictory, but you can understand why they think that way. Okay. The second possible reason so many different tenet systems are preserved is that they might think that each is needed as part of a program of, he doesn't say who they is, but they might think that each is needed as part of a program of gradual development, which is what you were saying, where you first understand this view, only then can you understand this next view, and so on, until you can understand a final established conclusion. For example, within the Gelugpa order, which is one of the sects of Tibetan Buddhism, and the one in which we predominantly find Buddhist debate in modern days, there are disagreements, but there is also broad agreement on countless assertions. Even so, within the Gelugpa tradition of debate, they preserve the many Buddhist tenet systems. They must see them as somehow essential for developing a final view. This is what Gandhindri Rinpoche was saying. So, and then a third possible reason so many conflicting tenet systems are preserved, which is likely a refinement of the second reason, is not that a student would have to adopt the different views as final in a story of philosophical and spiritual development, but that the student would have to have a clear and established understanding of how that system can be eternally consistent and sensible. Internally. Yeah. Isn't that what I said? Eternally. Internally consistent. and sensible eternally. In any case, however, it may be understood the second purpose of debate is to put forth a position that you can defend. It may be that either one, you settle on that position as final, or two, you just settle on a final understanding of that position from the point of view of that tenet system, even if it is not your own. Okay? So this third one of seeing how there can be different systems that within the assumptions or the groundwork of that system, what they're saying makes sense. Okay? And so, like the Chitta Madra system, if you've been studying Vaibhasika and Satantrika, when you come to Chitta Madra, Vaibhasika, you can see, okay, Satantrika, there's some differences, but you can kind of on top of it. And then Chitta Madra goes way out here. And then you come back to Madhyamaka, and you, how in the world did we get Chitta Madra? What these people believe is like weird. But if you study the system, then you can see within that system, it kind of makes sense. Maybe if you understand the Chitta Madras really well, then internally that system makes sense. But, it's good to study it and then, as an insider and as an outsider to it, question it. Because actually, this whole thing about latencies, how they describe latencies and everything, it sounds so weird, but there's an awful lot of that in the Madhyamaka view too. Not spelled out, but it's in the general Tibetan cultural view, about latencies causing things. Yeah. So at first it sounds very far out, but then you see, no. Yeah, we have all sorts of latencies on our mind. And because of that, we have different perspectives on things. And we have different views. And we see things in different ways. And we interpret things different ways. Yeah. And so the latency, it doesn't seem so far out after a while. You know what? I'll tell you. You won't like this story, but I'll tell you anyway. It's a good story. It makes sense. Okay, what really brought my attention to this whole thing of karmic view, yeah, so latencies, causing a karmic view of a situation. So each realm has its own view due to the karma of being born in that realm. Okay, so when I was living in Dharamsala, in what year? Maybe 1985. So or sometime around there. So I wasn't staying at Tushita. I was staying in the Tibetan village that was right above Dharamsala. And in those days, there was no plumbing in there, and there was no running water. And electricity, I'm not sure if we even had electricity. Anyway, I was staying at some Tibetans' house because they were away, and so I stayed at their house. And of course, no toilet. So in the morning, I would hike across the field and do my business. Okay, and I developed one place where I went every morning. And I think everybody in the little town had their own place, where they went. But you go and you do your business and you look and it's like, this stinks. And you come back the next day and it's disappeared. Why? Because the flies saw it as blissful wisdom nectar and ate it all up. And then you really start thinking about karmic vision and what being born in a realm means, and that things are not objective realities out there, because what I consider disgusting, the flies consider delicious lunch, and they made all gone every day. Yeah? So it really makes you think about, yeah, why is there this difference in how we view poo? Okay, so it has to do with the karma, the collective karma of being born in certain realms. Okay, so that's what made me think about this kind of stuff. But so my point is, when you get more into Chitta Madhya, you can see some consistency in it. There's still a lot of things in it that really puzzle me, that I can't make sense of. But some things you begin to see. Yeah? Okay. And I think that's helpful, if it's set out as, in the tenet books like this, then the tendency to just go, oh, this system is ridiculous. Why do I need to study it? If you've heard Ganden Tri Rinpoche say that, and if you think, oh, there were these wise sages who wrote this tenet system, these tenet books with all the different systems, and they must have had some reason for doing it. So let's see, the reason isn't obvious to me, like with your chemistry class, but maybe if I keep thinking about it, I'll learn something, and it'll become obvious why we study these things that at first don't seem to make a lot of sense to us. Okay. After I told you, when was it before, about the 21 commentaries to Prajnaparamita Sutra, and how we're all going, what are we, right? Are we spending so much time on this? So, yeah. Huh? No, to ornament, to Abhisamaya Alankara. Yeah. No, Uttara Tantra, there was one Indian commentary by a Sangha, that's it. It was not a widely spread, studied, commentated on text in India, which is amazing because it's quite important in China and also in Tibet, but not so much in India. The third purpose of reasoning and debate is to dispel any possible objections to our system, to clear up any uncertainties about our position. Of course, people snipe at whatever you put forth. Sometimes they just pick at it in hope of finding a fault, and sometimes they simply don't understand. Sometimes further explanation is needed to resolve an apparent inconsistency. And that's really true. Sometimes we assume that a person has a certain amount of knowledge or a certain kind of experience, and that if we just present this, they should understand it. And it's like, no, they have, they've never heard of that, or they've never experienced it. One guy during the testimony of Michael Cohen yesterday said that was the first day he had heard of Michael Cohen. And everybody's like, because he's been in the news for, how long. Everybody knows who he is. Poor guy. Congressperson? Huh? Yeah. A congressperson. Congress representative. Yeah. So, I don't know, unless everybody misheard him or he meant something else, but, okay. Yeah, but it's true, even around here, sometimes, you're having a discussion and you assume somebody has certain background knowledge, and they don't. Yeah, and so that it just indicates, okay, you have to go back and explain things and, lead them up to where you want them to go. Okay. This third purpose of debate is basically accomplished in the same style as is the first purpose, refuting mistaken views, through pointing out the opponent's failure of reasoning that shows in the misinterpretation of our system. However, here the roles are switched. When accomplishing the first purpose, refuting mistaken views, the author of a text speaks in the role of a challenger. When accomplishing the third purpose, dispelling objections to the system that has been presented, the author speaks in the role of the defender. Okay. Is this clear? Do you understand? Yeah? Do you understand? No. No? Okay. So in the first section, of a text, you're refuting the other person's mistaken views. Mm-hmm. So when you do that, you're saying the author. You're the challenger who's challenging their mistaken views, and they're the defender. Then you present your view. Then you're dispelling objections. At that time, the other person is asking questions about your views and presenting things because they think your views don't make sense. So then, at that time, you're in the role of the defender, not the challenger. The other person's the challenger.
So maybe I'm taking this immediately to something. But anyway, so when we look at, even when we're studying with Jeffrey, and we're going through the Lama Tsongkhapa text, and we see the objection, answer, objection, answer, objection, answer, are we saying that in the first part of the text, objection, answer is coming from one point of view, and the second part of this text, the objection, answer is coming from a different point of view? Or
we're still on the first point of view. It's somebody. No, wait a minute. No, we're doing the third point of view. It's usually the other people who are not understanding our thing and saying blah, 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 blah. They're the objector. And then Tsongkhapa is correcting their misunderstanding. So that's where, that's how this present text is being done. Yeah. Dharmakirti, I think it's the same. Yeah. It doesn't mean that all texts are written in that style, in that 3-point thing. The debating texts are written like that, and the collected topics are written like that. But it doesn't mean that everything we study is written like that. Okay. But what's interesting is, and in maps too, then somebody else is always objecting, and then Jamyang Shepa is explaining what the correct answer is, and that's a very prominent style of learning. Yeah, to do it like that in our education system, we don't use that style of learning. We use, here it is, here's the body of knowledge, memorize it, think about it, a little bit at least. But there's but depending where you are, then you can do debate. And this is, remember when was it with this group? Anyway, George Dreyfus was saying, because he studied at Sarah, and now he's working in an American university, and he's saying he's really disappointed in the university because you can't get into the same level of discussion about a topic that you did at the monastery. And that's because our education system is, here's the material, and then you think about it to whatever degree you want to. Whereas in the monastery, the whole way you learn the material is through the debate process. Yeah. So already, it's training the mind to, to look more closely and to ask questions and to pick out things that may or may not make sense. Okay, so you can see the beauty in it, even though sometimes you just wish that they would spell things out because, all this debate stuff is like so complicated. Do you reason that see that we've been on the same objection for how long? My foot's still in the air trying to figure out where I'm walking, where the being gone over is.
It's cold, they all stand up.
Yeah. We're all there. Jeffrey, can we go on to the next objection so I can put my foot down? So, yeah, but it's very interesting, as you walk around here. Yeah. It's like, watch your feet. It's like, well, where's the being gone over? Oh, it's right here. This is the area that is being gone over. It's right here. And then you go, where? Because the area you were referring to is now behind you. Yeah? So look at that and try and figure out where you are.
As you make your way around the turkey coop.
Yeah, right.
It's not been gone over.
Yes. Yeah. Or are you going in instead of over? Yeah, our dear turkeys. These three purposes of debate work together to move a student towards a refined understanding of any topic. It is easy for most of us to see this in the progress of science. For instance, think of the story of dinosaurs, which were unknown to us until the last couple hundred years. Really? People didn't know about dinosaurs? I'm sure they found dinosaur bones. What?
Not until the end of the 1800s.
Really? But didn't people dig up dinosaur bones before that?
They didn't assume. They assumed.
I thought they were dragons.
They didn't realize what they had. They thought it was a bone from 1,000 years ago as opposed to 65 million years ago.
Yeah. But still, they must have thought, gee, it was from some big animal.
Dragons.
You would think so.
Yeah.
They've been eroding out of the earth for.
Yeah, they keep, and farmers, they dig and these bones come out. So maybe they knew big bones, but they didn't know big bones as dinosaur bones.
Well, you didn't have science to say we know it.
Yeah.
People had already seen it.
Yeah, or to say how long ago they existed or whatever. Okay. This gets into the topic that we're coming into next about definition and definiendum and how you can know, the dinosaur bone's a good example. You know it's a big bone, okay, but you don't know it's an example of some kind of definiendum, but you don't know what it is, and you don't know what its definition is, but you know what the object is. Yeah. You know at least it's a big bone, but you don't know dinosaur bone, and you don't know the definition of dinosaur bone, so you don't know what it's an example of. Yeah, she knows a lot about this stuff.
Way back in 1676, Robert Plot, the curator of an English museum, described and drew a thigh bone that he believed belonged to a giant man. And they later figured out it was from some kind of dinosaur. In 1822, large teeth were discovered in England by some woman and her husband. It wasn't until 1841 that they realized such fossils something about them, I don't know. Anyway, they didn't work it out till later. She's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dinosaurs' tracks were studied in Connecticut in the 1830s. They thought they were from enormous ravens.
Freed
from Noah's Ark
what?
After the Great
Ravens
freed from Noah's Ark after the Great Flood.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah, well, if you have that worldview, why not? Why not, you know? Yeah. Was Noah's Ark in the Red Sea? Where was it?
The whole planet.
The whole planet was covered with water.
And it was flat back then. It didn't come around till the 1400s.
It took a while to become round.
But you have to have that view, see. If not, you have to change the view that you had before. Like, question what's in the Bible? Really?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And some people still will not question what's in the Bible. Yeah. And, you know, as I've told you many times, even some of my teachers, when they came to the West, because Vasubandhu said the world was flat, they thought the world was flat. And it wasn't until they talked to their Geshe buddies and at the other side of the road, other side of the world, back in the monastery, and they're saying, oh, it's dark here, and our Geshes are saying it's light here, that then they began to really believe that the world was round. At first they didn't believe it at all. Yeah. And these are very intelligent people. Yeah, I think I told you about that, didn't I? Yeah. That one nun figured it out in the hell realm, according to the Abbey Dharmakosha, is in California. It's so many paksay below, Bodh Gaya, and it turned out to be in California. Yeah, right. So these three purposes of debate work together to move a student towards a refined understanding of any topic. It is easy for most of us to see this in the progress of science. For instance, think of the story of dinosaurs, which were unknown to us until the last couple hundred years. Every year we develop a clear understanding of the dinosaurs through defeating wrong ideas about them, developing more and more of a factual narrative backed up with evidence, and refining that factual narrative further through ongoing rational discourse. Yeah. Okay, so now we're on chapter 20, definitions, divisions, and illustrations. Yeah?
I find this so incredibly open-minded that they have kind of developed the system and have been so open to, to study thoroughly the lower schools. Mm-hmm. And even so, they are very strong proponents of the Madhyamika view. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, when we look into our society, how much we don't want to look into other views, like your example before, or we're thinking, like in East Germany, that they didn't teach the children about American history or something like that to blind that out. So, but that makes their own system also weak in the end. So if you are not able to defend your own system, and there are so many things coming towards you that may shake your system, then you're not able to hold it. So, Buddhism will decline.
Yeah. So you're saying having people challenge our system and having this debate go on in society is quite healthy.
Yes, also from the worldly perspective, as you have learned, when you have been in Russia and all these museums about what happened in the Second World War, First World War, how good it is for the citizens to learn from those examples and then to not let it happen again because, the knowledge is there.
Yeah. And I was even thinking in terms of what's going on in America. I'm learning much more now about how the American government works than I did before. Do you find that you're learning more about it too?
As it stops working?
Yeah, exactly. As it stops working, to getting a better idea of what the Constitution is about and, how it's supposed to work. Yeah. Right. What is a presidential power? And how there's so many things that are not determined and that, we have to figure out now. Like the question, does, the president have the power to declare emergency and appropriate money that Congress has said for something else? I never thought about that before. They didn't teach me that. And where did we learn? Ninth grade? 8th grade, was it? Yeah. So, yeah. So as it's disappearing, we're learning about it.
Thinking about what people used to believe in the past, and the world is flat, and they were very intelligent people. Mm-hmm. It really makes you realize how dependent we are on other people for knowledge. It's not just a matter of your own intelligence that gives you an advantage. And then it also makes me very thankful that I live in a time when the Buddhist teachings are available, because there's practically no way that we're going to come up with this on our own.
Yeah, exactly. You had something, Em?
I was just thinking of a funny story from maybe middle school years, about having a firm worldview, because that was a time when I didn't really know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And I came across a YouTube video about a conspiracy theory about lizard kings in the center of the earth, or some crazy conspiracy theory. And I was believing it, maybe for a few days. And it was just totally out there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's quite important to test things out and have good reasons.
Well, we had one of our friends come here who's a very intelligent professional, and he was saying that, he thinks that 9/11 was a conspiracy, and he was citing that, when the plane hit the building, it didn't really explode. He thought all those films were doctored up, and that, and this is somebody very bright. So, yeah, so actually the definition of intelligence in Buddhism is, very different than what we think of, because we usually think about IQ, and if somebody has a high IQ, or if somebody's educated, they're intelligent. You can be educated but not very intelligent. Yeah, you can have a high IQ, but in terms of Dharma, be completely unable to understand it when it's being explained to you. Have you met people like that who are very bright people? When you start talking about the Dharma reasonings, they're just saying, oh, this is craziness. And there you see, it's not a given that if you are in quote, quote, intelligent, that you will necessarily understand things. Yeah. Yeah, we have this certain idea of what intelligence is in our culture, but it's kind of weird.
You can be very intelligent and be very emotionally attached to your ideas and to wrong views. Yep. And I think that most people have way more intelligence than they use. Yeah. We can also be just like emotionally distraught and distracted. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that inhibits us using our intelligence.
But especially attached to our views because they make us feel emotionally good. Yeah, not that the views are reasonable, but they make us feel good. So, okay, so chapter 20. In Tibet, the study of philosophy is known as the study of definitions, seni. So the term seni, means definitions. But this is what they say, what are you studying? Seni. And it means, philosophy, learning definitions. Seni also means characteristics. The characteristics of something. Think of this approach as looking for the essential characteristics of things, along with identifying the range of phenomena that have those characteristics. More broadly, the main way of explaining any topic the main ways of explaining any topic are through a survey of the definition of that thing, the divisions of that things, and the illustration of that thing. This is a very natural way of explaining a topic. It identifies exactly what we are talking about, the different types of that thing, and real examples of that thing. If you are able to do this clearly for any topic of human concern, such as our spiders, that's what that word is, spiders. How do you say it?
Arachnids.
Arachnids. Okay. Arachnids. The CH is a K. But you can say spiders too. Cancer in human beings, firearms, human twins, and so on. You have at least begun to have control of that topic. You don't ever control a topic. Okay, so we start out with definitions. So a definition exists in relation to its definiendum. So a definiendum, because I had never heard this word before. Have you heard it before? Definiendum is the object being defined. Okay, so you have the object being defined, the definiendum, and the definition of that object. Okay, so sarcasm was the definiendum, and that crazy, whacked out definition. We have to rewrite the dictionary so it agrees with us. Right? Okay. Okay. Normally, we think of a definition as a string of words that captures and expresses very clearly exactly what is meant by a term. That term is the definiendum, the thing defined. In this way of thinking of definitions and definienda, the plural of definiendum, both the definition and the definiendum are words, and we use these words to refer to things in the world. In the Buddhist way of thinking, the definienda are still words, handy labels for things, but the definitions are the real things themselves. For instance, there is a definition of a pot, a bulbous, flat-based phenomena able to perform the function of holding water. Or in brief, flat-bottom, bulbous base water holder. Okay? You learn that very quickly. Okay? According to this definition, the nature of a pot is to be bulbous, flat-based phenomena, and the function of a pot is to be able to hold water. So in the Buddhist way of thinking of definitions and definienda, a flat-bottom, bulbous-faced water holder is a real thing, like the kind of thing found in your kitchen, not just a string of words that describes a pot. A pot is an expression that we use as a handy convention to refer to all these flat-bottom, bulbous-based water holders, period. Okay. Do you want me to read it as it has here? Flat-bottom, bulbous-based water holder is easier, isn't it? Now, I always have a question about this. When they say the definition is the actual object. Okay. Yeah. Then, by saying, the definition is the actual object, then is the object the definition? Because we wouldn't say this is a definition, would we?
Use, but without Buddhist philosophy, what you're saying works. But it is the object. The definition is the object. It's the thing.
It's the thing. But if you point to a thing, if you look at this, do you say this is the definition of cup?
Yes, you have to.
Huh?
If you had your sutra hat on.
No, you would still say this is a cup. Yeah, because the cup is, a handy convention to refer to all of those flat-bottom, bumbleless-based water holders.
Cup is the name.
Yeah. Okay, but we still say this is a cup.
The name of that thing is a cup.
The name of the thing is a cup. We say the definition of this thing is a flat-bottom, bulbous-based water holder. That you can say. Then what do you say when you're talking about this?
You can say either.
Yeah, but do you go around saying, the name of this thing is a cup? Or do you go around saying, this is a flat-bottom, bulbous-based water holder?
No, we use names. That's why we have names.
Yeah, that's why we have names. But so it's very puzzling to me when they say that the definition is refers to the object.
I think it makes more sense when you think about how we learn these things. To me, it makes more sense when you think about how you learn these things.
Okay, so explain to me.
So if you're a little 3-year-old, and you've never seen a gong before, you would describe it, the object, and then someone would teach you the name.
Yeah.
Gong. But before you have that name gong, you would say, well, there's this bowl-shaped thing.
Or you would look at this and say, there's this flat-bottom, bulbous-based water holder.
Yeah, infant might not use those words, but that's descriptive of the object.
Mm-hmm. But it just sounds very funny to me to say that the definition is the object.
Yeah, but it is funny because we're so immersed in our understanding of the word definition from how we use it.
Yeah,
it's really hard. I mean, until you really get it that stands for the object.
Yeah,
in the system, it's completely confusing.
But also, when they talk about you have your definition, your divisions, and your illustration, this would be an illustration of flat-bottom, bulbous-based water holders. It would be an illustration of a cup, or a pot. Yeah. So I don't know, it's funny because to me, an illustration is an example of what that thing is.
Yeah, I don't know much about illustrations, but I thought illustrations have to not explain the thing fully, but
right, they have to illustrate it. Yeah, but this thing is an illustration of a pot. Yeah. But if it's an illustration, it can't be the definition.
What's the definition of illustration?
Yeah. A definition is different. When you're talking about pots, the definition of pot is different than the illustration of pot.
Coming up, it says that a gold pot is not an illustration of pot.
Yeah.
I don't fully understand why yet, but so then that probably can't be an illustration of cup or pot.
Well, then you wind up with no illustration at all. Now, the reason they say a gold pot is not an illustration of pot is because to understand gold pot, you already have to understand pot. Okay? And to be an illustration of something, it doesn't mean you have to understand what it is first. Okay? The illustration helps you understand it. Okay? But an illustration is an example of something. So it's an example of a pot. Would you say it's a definition of a pot? Anyway, this is something to think about. It's always been very puzzling to me. I've never been able to get this straight in my mind. So I'm asking you in the hopes that you'll get confused and then think about it and figure it out. Okay, because a definition is a real thing, and this Buddhist system asserts a truly existent external reality, a definition such as flat-bottom bulbous-based water holder is called a substantial existent. Okay, it exists substantially as a real thing. On the other hand, a definiendum, such as a pot, is called an imputed existent. Okay, so the idea is that a substantial existent is a real thing. Yeah, imputed existent is, it's imputed to be that. Okay, so pot is the name that's imputed to that substantial thing, which is flat bottom, bulbous based, and holds water. Okay. But do we really call that a pot? Is that how you would define pot? You know, when we get further on in this, and it says, each definiendum has one definition, and each definition has one definiendum. But I've seen this argument where the word is sometimes it's pot. It started out as vase. Yeah, it used to bumpa, because bumpa is the Tibetan word. Used to be vase. Then it became jar. Now it's pot. It could also be cup. It could also be glass.
Could be under a bowl.
Yeah, could be a bowl.
That gong is bulbous, flat-bottomed.
But doesn't hold water.
It would.
No, but it's not. It doesn't have the function because we don't use it that way.
Yeah, but his definition says able to perform the function of.
Okay, it could perform the function of holding water, but then somebody will scream at you for ruining the metal of the gong.
Some definitions, it included that it had a lip, like a lip for pouring. And so in my mind, I had this image of a jug that you poured water from. It's not like a cup that you drink from. It's a water jug or a, I don't know why vase.
Yeah, so maybe there's different definitions, but in the text it says only one definition for it. Or maybe that is a definition of a jug. Okay, so jug is another word that we could add to what this is. Flat bottom, bulbous base. Yeah, a jug fits that definition. Water holder. Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, and then also, we'll get into this later, but, you can see then there's some words that have multiple definitions. Yeah. I was thinking about it like pot. Has multiple definitions. Yeah, different kind. There's pot and there's pot.
It's now legal.
Yeah, and it's now legal. Okay. So it's funny, the way they describe it, then when you think about it, that doesn't make total sense.
Isn't that idea just a convention of debate?
Well, that could be, and I would say so, but they don't tell you that. It hasn't come up in the book so far, has it?
A wordly example of this is when you're learning how to fly airplanes, in regard to navigation, they don't tell you to look for the football field to see, like the school or the area that you're flying over, but they describe what it is. Like if you see dark striped things on the ground, it's probably railroad tracks, then you could follow that. And so they don't tell you to look for like railroad tracks, they tell you to look for like a definition similar to this.
Huh, interesting. Why do you think they do that? So that you aren't limited by your own conceptions?
Probably. And things probably look different places that you fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at altitude, yeah.
Okay. A definiendum is an imputed existent because it is just the name imputed to its own particular definition, the things with those characteristics. However, because of the way pervasion works, do not take this to mean that whatever may be referred to by any particular definiendum, like a pot, a functioning thing, an existent, and so on, is necessarily a name. Okay? So the name, it is what is imputed, but the object is not a name. Okay. For instance, pot is not a name, a mere sound, but it's a tangible object. Okay. So it sounds so weird, doesn't it? Pot is not a name, it's not a sound, but it's a tangible object. But it's an imputed existent because it's just the name given to the objects that have certain characteristics. Okay? But it is a tangible object. So you have to switch your way of thinking here when you're talking about definition and definiendum. Okay, however, the word pot is a name. Okay, so the word pot is a name or conventionality commonly accepted as meaning something along the lines of a flat-bottom bulbous-based water holder. Okay, so that's the word pot is that name. Okay, and the definiendum is an imputed existence because it is the name that's given to the definition. But the pot is not a name, it's a tangible object.
It was hard as the way they said that. They should rewrite that sentence and say, for instance, that thing that we call, that object that we label pot is not a name. That's how they should write that sentence.
Yeah.
That's what they're meaning.
Right.
We use names for shorthand. And now he's using it as shorthand. And it's confusing if you don't understand, if you don't always remember that a definition refers to an object. That's the solution to the problem. If you always remember that definition in this Buddhist thing is referring to an object, then you won't get confused when you're reading this thing, I find. So, but they're the way they wrote the sentence is confusing. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Not exactly.
Okay.
In this instance.
So.
Yeah, I understand the general idea of what you're saying, but I don't understand exactly how
it relates to this sentence.
Yeah, I understand how it relates to that sentence, but to this whole topic. But we can keep reading, and hopefully the whole topic will get clearer. Is everybody? I'm just throwing all my doubts in as I'm teaching, and you all look like you're getting very tired. Like, I don't want to talk about pot. Yeah, give me some pot. I don't want to talk about pot. No, don't give me some pot. No. Okay, shall we stop here? Yes.
Sorry. No, just to say, but I think what Venerable Tapa was saying was in the debates, they do switch between those points of view to trick each other. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point.
Right.
Like to train the mind to hold those views and to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And my other question is how can something have a flat bottom and a bulbous base at the same time?
Because the bottom is flat, but the base... The base is above the bottom, and it's bulbous. But that could describe certain kind of I mean, like a glue container? What do you call a glue container?
Glue bottle.
A glue bottle. Oh, okay, so bottle's another thing. Flat bottom, bulbous based. Glue holder.
Glue used to be hide glue, and they would heat it before they'd use it. And it was held in something called a glue pot, which is shaped like that, like that.
Like what?
Shaped like a gong.
Like a gong. Okay.
I think one thing to think about with the definition and definiendum is, in English we use the word definition to mean that string of words that defines something. Yeah. So it's what defines something. And in Tibetan, they're using it to mean, or in this system,
to the object.
It refers to that which is defined.
Right.
And the characteristics of that thing that define it. Mm-hmm. So it's not referring just to the string of words that define it, but the characteristics described by those words that defines that object.
Okay. So the definition of a pot is flat bottom bulbous based water holder. So the definition of the pot is mutually inclusive with flat bottom bulbous based water holder, right? This is a flat bottom bulbous based water holder. Is this a definition of a pot?
It's not bulbous. It's cylindric.
Well, just go with me. Okay. Is this a definition of a pot?
In this system, yes.
You would say this is a definition of the pot? If somebody said, what is the definition of the pot? Would you say it's over there on the table?
No, I would say that's an illustration.
I would say it's an illustration of a pot. So then it gives you the idea, then is pot somehow like Plato's thing, because Plato didn't everything, there were all these illustrations, but he had some ideal thing that was the table sitting, I don't know, somewhere. Yeah.
Ideal type.
Huh?
Ideal type.
Yeah. So then it leaves you with this. Okay, put it down on the Geshe list. Yeah. We should, ask Geshe Dadul when he comes about this.
Is that ideal type of generality?
Well, they're not even getting into that here, because they're saying the definition is the object. Anyway, think about it. And let's see if we can figure out what in the world this is, okay? I think we all understand that the word pot is a label given to the definition of the pot, and that's what makes the definienda an imputed existent, and the definition substantial existent. That part we can get exactly what they mean by definition, and the difference between definition and illustration, because they've got to be different.
If the definiendum is the name,
mm-hmm.
and the definition is the object itself, then they have the words that describe something, they don't deal with that?
Yeah, what do they call the words that describe it?
We call it the definition.
No, we call it the definition. They would probably, the words that describe it have something to do with, the conceptual mind. Yeah, giving labels to characteristics. Okay, so something to chew on until next week.
So under abstract composite,
mm-hmm.
I'm sure that physical and verbal actions fall under that. Is that correct?
No, the physical action has to do with the body, the form. The verbal action is sound, your voice.
Yeah, but
actually, the karma itself is the mental factor of intention.
Right, but when you have to see something besides an abstract composite to know an abstract composite. Like you have to see the aggregates in order to know a person.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking you see the body move, then you know action, the action of moving, like prostration. And like chanting, you know the act. Chanting produces a sound, but the act of producing that it's not a physicality, is it?
But the way they talk about, the actions they do, at least some schools, the Vaibhasika and the Prasangika, say that the physical and verbal actions are the body moving or the sound and expressive sound. And, what gets confusing about abstract composites is you say, okay, to know the person, you have to see the body and mind, but then you can say, oh, to know the cup, then you have to see either the sides or the top. So or the color. So does that make the cup an abstract phenomena? And you say, no, the cup is a form. Okay? So in Satantrika, when they're talking that way, their whole idea of labeling objects is quite different than in Madhyamaka.
I was thinking also about mental actions, and thinking that they must be consciousness.
Yeah.
But you're saying that a physical action it's not matter though. It's a movement.
They have different ways. I think by and large everybody agrees that the action is the karma, the mental factor of intention. But the Vaibhasikas and most of the Prasangikas, they also have a way of saying that the physical action and the verbal action are also form. The mental action is never form, because that's just the mind, totally the mind. Yeah. But it has to do with, and I can't remember what it is. It has something to do with, okay, if you beat somebody up, but that person doesn't die immediately, at the time that they die, your mind can be in a virtuous state. So you can't say that action is just the mental factor, because then you would have one virtuous mental factor and a non-virtuous mental factor at the same time. So somehow that action of killing has to be form that you accumulate somehow. I don't understand it. It's part of this stuff that I don't understand, but it has something to do with that. That a way that they have to use that to avoid something else. To say that you have two.
To avoid having accumulated the karma of killing while you're in a virtuous state.
Right. Or avoid having two intentions at the same moment, because you can only have one mental factor of intention at a time. Yeah, so lots of times when, you're reasoning something and you come to a block, then you have to think of something else that explains it. So it has something to do with that. But like I said, it's not something I've ever felt like I have a thorough grasp on.
The list of abstract composites, you went over, I think, from Meditation on Emptiness. Mm-hmm. It lists a bunch of things, and some of those things might be actions. Is aging an action?
Now, aging, they would say, is to know aging, you would, I would say aging is a type of impermanence. And to know aging, you have to see something that has aged. And you don't see the aging itself. You see this at this time, and then you see that at that time, and you impute what happened to it as aging.
Okay.
Yeah, but aging changes. It's a conditioned phenomena.
If you knew about this, I read a thing by Bhikkhu Analayo who said that in the early scriptures that fourth aggregate didn't include so much. It was mostly, I think, just what we think of as the five aggregates and not much more. I'd have to read it. But that concept of what was put in that category changed over time, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, yeah, philosophy changes over time. Why not?